I'm trying to show you the murky white, the milky white, and this is dilute silver hydroperoxide, but with a little salt, a pinch of salt added. And that forces the silver out of solution so that it hangs in solution as a suspension of nano-sized particles of peroxides of silver, hydroperoxides of silver. And of course the danger is if you let this sit still and don't stir it around a couple times a day, it'll settle to the bottom and then it'll start to form a patch or two. All it needs is one patch of silver that will come out of solution, turn into silver, and then aggregate into larger sized particles and form this patch of silver particles patch in the center of the dust, the oxidized silver dust, so to speak, that's sitting at the bottom of the solution. So one of the problems is how to find the right way to debride the physiology, especially if you don't have a wound. And one of the ironies is that salt may be the best methodology, not cayenne pepper, not cold, not electricity, just salt. And it may be because silver hydroperoxide does not have a spread of charge, a polarity of charge, positive here, negative there. It could be that silver hydroperoxide is all one charge, negative. And that might be why it stays in solution so well, is because there's no competition with it. But there's no debridement. And I say this because debridement is current. That's what current does. It burns flesh. And when you have a voltage potential between 2 points, you literally have the possibility of a current flowing between them. And that's what you get with a salt. And that's why silver comes out of solution whenever we deal with silver salts, because we have a current that destabilizes the silver in solution, turning it into a metal, which is what it wants to do, conduct the electricity, far more efficiently than an electrolyte dissolved in water, such as silver chloride dissolved in water. It does not pass current through the water very efficiently. But if the silver should come out of solution, which it's prone to do anyway, especially with the instigation of a current or a voltage potential that's begging it to come out and supply a conductive pathway between two different voltage points, namely a negative ion over here, a positive ion over there, then it's going to do so. And that's what a salt is going to do. So it's moving in that direction. All the trouble I went to make silver hydroperoxide, to dissolve silver in solution and keep it there, discourages a current and discourages debridement. It supplies silver very efficiently in soluble form, but it does not encourage regeneration because there's no current. And that's how the body operates. It operates on the basis of a current. So, it's an ironic problem because we're doing two things that are counteropposed to each other, namely salt and silver hydroperoxide. Namely current, that's what an electrolyte represents, is the possibility for a current to develop if you construct it properly within the geometry of a battery, versus a voltage potential represented by silver hydroperoxide, which is strictly a negative charge in chemical form, and quite stable by comparison to hydrogen peroxide, which is not stable and leaves solutions. So we stabilize it by oxidizing nano-sized particles of silver. We oxidize with hydrogen peroxide, and then we add MSM to stabilize it even further. But it's a one-sided charge, and I thought that was pretty cool. Oh, look how smart I am. But I got halfway to the goal of Becker's protocol and stopped short, thinking, okay, what else do I do? Do I do cayenne pepper? Do I make a wound like Dr. Pramod Vora does? Do I use cayenne pepper like most people do traditionally? Neither. We do what Becker did. What did he do? He used a saline solution in the gauze dressing the wound. And then he put his electrode, whether it was platinum or silver, above, attached to the top side of that wet gauze dressing to drive electricity current down through the gauze dressing and through the wound to the opposite side of the limb or body. Low amperage, moderate voltage, picoamps I would say. I mean, he used nanoamps, but I wouldn't go there. Even microamps, he said in his patent. But picoamps was his research, the data from his research. And voltage a little more than what he used, but it could be less. You know, it could be the voltage level of the body, let's put it that way. But you have to do a little bit more in order to guide the current where you want it to go. So you have to raise you have to have voltage supplied to the body greater than what it's putting out. In your circuit, the circuit has to create slightly more voltage, or else you're not going to be able to get the voltage where you want it to go, because it's going to be cancelled and overwhelmed by the voltage potential of the body and the arrangement of the voltage, mapping of the body. So you have to elevate voltage. So I, by practice, elevate it 10 times more than the body. I wouldn't want to go beyond that. So something between, 1 and 10, a factor of 1 or a factor of 10 times more than whatever the body is putting out, so you can move the voltage around. It doesn't have to be 10 times, but something greater than 1. But that's all very well and good. But if he put silver ions in his gauze dressing, now he's got a saline solution and he's got silver chloride. And he's driving the silver, but in very minute quantities. He's driving, and only for the purpose of healing. Once it's done, and he never uses silver again. He doesn't like people like us who want to use silver all the time. So he drives silver into the wound, but it's going through a saline solution, using electricity to drive it. Now, if I don't use electricity to drive it, if I just, soak in a bathtub, and I make the silver highly oxidized to render it more bioavailable, in the form of silver hydroperoxide with MSM, I can add a pinch of salt, water softener salt. It comes in rock salt form, and it's very inexpensive. Oh God, it's like $5 for 25 pounds. And you don't want to add hard minerals, because it's bad enough, having tap water, well water, filled with hard minerals, because that's going to compete with the silver in solution and drive it out of solution and cause it to precipitate. So actually, if you have a water softener, a sodium chloride based water softener, a sodium chloride salt water softener in your intake for your home plumbing, that would be ideal. And then you add even you may not even have to add any salt then, and you'll be minus any hard minerals. You would just add the silver hydroperoxide and the MSM, and you'd be away you'd go. Now, if there's no chloride ions in the tap water to speak of, then you might have to add a pinch of salt anyway. But it would be far superior than the rest of us who don't have water softeners. And then you'd have to add salt, and you've got the hard minerals in the water competing with the silver, and it's a mess. So that would be the ideal, but less than ideal. If you don't have a sodium chloride salt water softener, just add salt to the tub, but just a pinch of it, because it takes so little. Because it's going to come out of solution, and it has to be used immediately, fresh. Because if you store, you can't store silver hydroperoxide with salt in it. I store it with MSM in it to try to stabilize it. But if you start storing it any long term, like a few days or weeks with salt in it, you're not going to have a solution of silver anymore, let alone peroxide, let alone hydroperoxide. It's just not going to be there. It's going to be silver particles. So it's like produce. It's like sprouts. You have to use it fresh. You have to make it and use it right away. And salt is the missing ingredient. It's just like, some people like to cook with salt to bring out the flavor, while other people would prefer, like me, would prefer not to cook with salt, but just add it at the last minute to flavor the food, but not cook with salt. That's the approach to take with the bath and with wound care. And so I'm making a penis wrap. It has a silver hydroperoxide with MSM, but I added a pinch of salt. And the only reason why I get away with it is every time I wet a new wrap, every time I pee, I change the wrap, I get a fresh new one, I rinse it out under the tap, and I hang it up to dry, and I take a dry one, and I lay it down in a saucer, a salad-sized saucer, and I pour a little bit of solution in the middle and let it moisten. And so, but I keep swirling. Every time I do this, I keep swirling this to make sure this doesn't settle. Because if it settles, then the silver particles, the oxides, the peroxides, particles of silver start to interact with each other. and encourage each other to come out of peroxide, because they're already out of solution due to the salt, the presence of salt. So that's bad enough as it is. But I wouldn't want to store it that way. So all of my large buckets of silver solution are stored without salt. They're made with distilled water, colloidal silver, made with distilled water, interacted with hydrogen peroxide with MSM added, and that's it. And that's the only way to keep it stable in solution. And it'll stay that way for quite some time, a lot longer than colloidal silver. It won't last. But silver hydroperoxide with MSM lasts a long time. And then at the last minute, or in small batches that get used up, and you keep swirling it around, you can add a pinch of salt. And that's all it takes to make all the difference in the world. You don't need something salty like the ocean, just a pinch of salt. And that provides the debridement that Becker did talk about in his book, The Body Electric. He talks about the use of salt. You know, we are in our amniotic fluid in our mother's tummy, and we're surrounded by a salt solution that we create. Comes from our kidneys. The minute the fetus develops a kidney, it pees into the amniotic sac that has formed around it and creates its own amniotic fluid from its own pee. And that fluid contains salt because our pee contains sodium chloride. But that forms the debridement that is needed, the stimulant, the initiative that is needed. Yeah, maybe it's better to use the word initiative or motivation. The initiative that the body needs to motivate itself to regenerate in the first place, along with, of course, the presence of stem cells. But you need the right chemistry. And so we're trying to make up for lack of stem cells by using silver in a form that is highly bioavailable. And that's where hydrogen peroxide, with something like MSM playing a supportive role, comes into the picture. But we still need the salt, and of course we need the water. And of course hydrogen peroxide provides oxygen, which is great. It's superb. You know, the cells need oxygen and they need water. But they also need salt. And this has been the missing ingredient that I keep overlooking because I know they're antagonistic. I know salt and silver don't work. Well, if you're trying to store it for long-term storage on the shelf, duh, yeah. But that's not what we're doing. The body is a living system. It's dynamic. And so all of our ingredients, we have to look at it in terms of freshness of ingredients. Not in terms of something stable that you sit on the shelf, because then you get a skewed vision of reality about Becker's protocol, how to implement it in chemical format without the use of electricity. And this is what I've been attempting to do, because I want to be able to treat the whole body, and the bathtub is superb. No electricity, just a solution. Or a gauze dressing that's kept on the area of the body that we want to regenerate, for instance, the bare head of the penis that has been circumcised, kept there 24/7 with a fresh solution, but of what? And I haven't been getting the results that I want, and it's probably because I avoid debridement, because I just assumed getting a scalpel and recircumcising myself was the only way, because that's what Becker did. He dealt with wounds, and Dr. Pramod recreated wounds by using a needle to puncture the skin and make it bleed. But the fetus doesn't bleed. It doesn't have any puncture wounds. It just sits in an amniotic fluid of salt for 9 months, 24/7. And Becker talked about this. And so he used salt in his wound care by wetting the gauze dressing with a saline solution. So why am I avoiding it, you know? This is the only acceptable method, because I don't want to bleed, I don't want to cut, I don't want to, poke. I don't want to injure myself further than I already am. I want to heal. I want to regenerate. So it's going to be a question of trying to deal with mutually antagonistic ingredients, salt and silver hydroperoxide. And the presence of MSM may be an advantage, but still it's not enough to undermine the antagonism between salt and silver hydroperoxide. It's just, they're going to continue to be antagonistic. So, the salt doesn't have an issue. It's the silver hydroperoxide that has an issue of non-stability to it. And salt's going to undermine what little credibility of stability the silver has received by way of hydrogen peroxide and MSM. So it's like a tightrope act, It's like a man on a wire walking a tightrope. And so we have to be cognizant of that kind of risk involved. But I think this is the only way to approach it. and get the results that we want to get. You know, I don't mind if this takes years, but I want to make sure that my protocol is holistic and not leave anything out. And up till now I have, because I didn't have the insight, I guess, to understand that there is a solution to this, a resolution, but it not involving cutting, poking, and bleeding. Okay, so it is possible, or burning, you know, with something like cayenne pepper, you know, but it is possible, or freezing in a cold bath. I mean, good God, you know, if you're up to that, fine, but, you know, 1-2 times and okay, I've had enough, you know, even one time is too much. But salt seems to be the way to go.